Ever since Mario first defied every natural law of physics only to be told that the princess was in fact actually chilling in some other dude's castle and lol, sure she was, video games have absolutely reveled in the old rug pull. Friends become enemies, enemies become friends, the cake of all things is a lie, I mean, you've played them. Traditionally, the seeds of these things tend to be woven into the story from the very start, and sadly, once you've been around the block and or assorted castles a few times, you get fairly accustomed to spotting them. Pretty rare that any title is able to hide an absolute game changer from you, let alone something that recontextualizes the entire narrative. Rarer still though is the whole idea of not revealing your biggest twists. Instead, going to lengths to insert them into the game, but happily letting the majority of players ride through them without ever spotting them. Whether that's having NPCs with astonishing but optional scenes, or just writing an entire subplot into a new character, shoving them into the background and never mentioning them again, sometimes a video game's best story is the one it doesn't tell us. My name is Adam Cleary and these are 10 background video game characters that change everything. Number 10, Moira and Patrick, BioShock. For a large part of BioShock, Moira and Patrick provide the proof of both Andrew Ryan's inherent evil and Atlas's noble intentions, being as they are the supposed wife and child of the latter who were horrifically blown up in a submarine while attempting to escape Rapture. Oops. With several unidentifiable bodies, mostly splices, splattered all over Smuggler's hideout, Atlas falls into a relatively convincing state of grief and implores the player to seek Ryan out and enact some semblance of revenge. I mean, come on, the guy's family was in that submarine, why wouldn't you go and crack some skulls, eh? However, if you've been paying attention, you'll notice that the names Patrick and Moira are plastered everywhere in the game. It's the title of a musical about some dead people at the Fleet Hall Theatre, and my word, what a coincidence that must be. Oops, no, you've just been played. Dropping the Atlas moniker, Frank Fontaine reveals it was all a ruse to have you do his bidding, even joking that he might have to get a real family one day as they play well with the suckers. That's you. Number 9, NILES SAMSON, Gears of War 5. In Gears 5, the frozen and astonishingly well-preserved let's be real here body of Niles is a pretty morbid piece of set dressing in the New Hope research facility. Having died during the initial Locust revolt at Mount Kadar, he quickly uploaded his essence into a computer, making himself the 180p antagonist of Gears of War 2. However, as the story unfolds across the many installments of the game, his role becomes steadily more crucial. Initially tasked with studying pediatric rust lung in the children of emulsion miners and, ideally to find a cure, his work led him down a darker and darker rabbit hole that would eventually birth the entire Locust Horde. Being something of a mad scientist, he'd begun using cross-species genetic manipulation and, when combined with a woman named Mira's natural immunity, accidentally created an entire race of subterranean mutants that destroyed civilization as we knew it. Which, as a prop in a chair goes, is a pretty staggering legacy to have left. Incidentally, the official Gears of War wiki listing him as weapons non-hair color bald is the most savage epitaph I think I've ever read. Number 8, Ish, The Last of Us. A subtle inclusion this, but one that forced a hefty chunk of players to recontextualize the world the game was set in. The Last of Us, from the very beginning sequences all the way through to the suburbs chapter, is filled to bursting point with the monstrous. Literal monsters roaming the streets, the monsters in society the shattered world has created as a result. There is no good for Ellie and Joel to find anywhere, save for what they can find in each other. However, some incredibly small discoveries across the level entirely reshape the world in which the game is set, and how you perceive it through both of your protagonists. A series of notes left by several children reveals that a man named Ish was successful, however briefly, in protecting a number of families by founding a thriving community in the sewers. While never seen in the game aside from a drawing left by one of the children, the hope he brought to those around him changes the entire tone of the game from dog-eat-dog survival to the perseverance of the human spirit with an assist from very big guns. Number 7, CODY, Street Fighter. Shared universes are all the rage these days, but back in the late 80s and early 90s, a time in human history famous for giving you such wondrous cultural gifts as, well, me, they were about as rare as a John Hughes film that didn't have a heartwarming dance montage. Thus, when CODY, one of the 3 major heroes of the Final Fight series, was seen chilling out, maxing, relaxing, all cool while eating face in the background of the Metro City stage in Street Fighter Alpha 2, seasoned nerds of the day lost their minds. Did this mean that both games were part of a larger story? Did this mean we might one day get to see a crossover between them? Well, long answer yes with an if, short answer no with a but. The games are considered by Capcom to be cousins, which means they get to hang out together at Christmas, but they must absolutely not ever kiss ever. Cody did make his way over to Street Fighter properly one day though as a downloadable character in that big Street Fighter Tekken mashup. That and he's a summonable spirit in, of all things, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Number 6, Q, Street Fighter. Did somebody say more Street Fighter content?
No! God, please, no! No!
Well, you're getting it anyway. Before we start, I'm going to level with you. This one is a wild theory that, if true, actually rewrites a huge slice of the Street Fighter lore. In short, it's that Gil and Bison are not the real villains here, but G is. The proof is that despite Q debuting in Street Fighter 3, he can actually be seen in the background of Street Fighter 2. This is because there are many Qs. And through the entirely trivial power of mind control, G has dispatched them across the globe to find the world's strongest fighters so that he might ultimately destroy and or assimilate them. All this is part of a larger plan to unite the world in an incredibly unpleasant way. Think less everybody sat around a campfire and more giant screens of glorious leader telling you progress only comes through obedience. Capcom has never confirmed if the mysterious man seen in the docks is Q, preferring instead to leave his status as the franchise's most mysterious character intact. If he is though, and he truly does work for G, then the entire backstory splits wide open. Number 5, G-Man, Half-Life. In a line lifted almost directly from my CV, Half-Life's G-Man is described as a sinister, interdimensional bureaucrat. Recurring throughout the series, his presence in the initial game is incredibly easy to miss until the very closing stages, normally quietly observing you play the game from the safety of some unreachable areas. There are many theories about his origins, and indeed as the franchise rolled on, he became one of the central narrative pillars, but in that first game, he's little more than eerie window dressing. Who's that adjusting their tie on a tram? It's G-Man. Arguing with a scientist while shooting you daggers? G-Man. Casually peering down from a walkway before bolting down a corridor? That's G-Man. Innocuously admiring the view of this cave while a soldier gets his skull melted off less than 20 feet away? G-Man. This guy is about as unsettlingly casual as a pair of Hawaiian shorts at a funeral. When he finally does get a chance to interact with you at the game's climax, he wields powers well beyond those of a mere human and launches you through space on some kind of magic tram. Number 4, ELANOS HALIAT, Mass Effect. The Skillian Blitz is arguably one of the most important events in the entire Mass Effect universe. As well as being a bloodthirsty raid on the human colony of Elysium designed to unite the various pirate bands of the Terminus systems, it was also the event that most directly influenced Shepard's various backstories. If you're playing him or her as a war hero, then he's the man or woman who managed to organize the colonists and repel the invaders, as well as single-handedly fighting off scores of them to critically turn the tide of the battle. He or she is awarded the incredibly shiny Star of Terror, and everybody thinks he or she is very brave. But if you're playing him or her in the far more fun, ruthless mode, then he or she actually got involved in the revenge attack on Torfan. Either way, the Blitz is the touch paper for the explosive part of your career, and it all happens thanks to one easy-to-miss character featured later in the game. The not as notorious as he'd have liked crime lord ELANOS HALIAT is the man responsible for all of this, and yet only makes a very small appearance in a solitary quest where he's bitch-slapped down and never heard from again. Without him, there is no Mass Effect, but there's barely any of him. Number 3, Mrs. Downs, Red Dead Redemption 2. Look, I know modern life is very busy. I know that these game developers seem absolutely obsessed with creating the biggest, sprawling world possible with absolutely no consideration for how many hours it's actually going to take you, a normal person, to successfully navigate. I just want to say that I understand. I totally get it if you got all the way through Red Dead Redemption and have absolutely no idea who Mrs. Downs is or why she's important. You might recognize the name from the core story, or I don't know, maybe a face rings a bell, but it's in her side quest that everything, as our title would suggest, changes. Beating her terminally ill husband over a debt he can't pay, Arthur ultimately contracts both tuberculosis and a hefty case of the guilt from his interactions with the Downs family. Finding a widowed Edith selling her body later in the game, Arthur takes it upon himself to make things right in a series of optional missions. Doing so will unlock both additional dialogue during his final moments and drastically open up the character in the process. Far from being an outlaw whose luck simply ran out, out, the Downs quest establishes Arthur as an undeniably good man who is simply doing his best to make a living in a dangerous world. Choose to miss it simply because, well, my god, you've already sunk 100 hours into just staring at the back of a goddamn horse, and it's a drastically different game. Number 2, ZACK, Final Fantasy VII. Yeah, a lot of Final Fantasy VII players would be forgiven for thinking that Zack's role in the original game, we are not touching the remake here, doesn't so much change everything, rather that it is everything. But it's only through an optional cutscene very late in the game does the entire story, warts and all, unfurl itself. Right, where do we begin here? Cloud Strife is a mercenary who, having served in the elite military unit Soldier, is plagued by confusing flashbacks and a mysterious voice in his head. He remembers things he shouldn't, draws a blank when he should have clarity, and is repeatedly mocked by his own nemesis over how he recalls an incident that occurred 5 years prior to the game. Meanwhile, a barely mentioned character named Zack has been missing for a number of years and was once the love interest of the game's other main character, Aerith. It transpires that, traumatized by the destruction of his village and poisoned by the Mako energy source that powered it, Cloud, only ever a lowly guard, was experimented on extensively in the aftermath. Broken out by his best friend Zack, he was carried across the world to safety while being regaled with all of his many adventures in Soldier. Catatonic and with little idea of who he really was, Cloud's mind simply absorbed these stories as his own memories instead. When Zack dies on the outskirts of Midgar, Cloud eventually comes back to his senses and begins to resume his life, unaware that the last few years are a total fiction designed to repress his trauma. It's a kid's game though, according to my dad. Number 1, The President, Metal Gear Solid. Arguably the dictionary definition of a background character who ultimately changes everything, the President in Metal Gear Solid starts off as a passing mention in the intro before just exploding the sloppy innards of the entire plot all over the nice rug in the post-credits outro. When Snake asks Colonel Campbell, who's in supervisory control of this operation, and is told, "The President of the United States," it barely raises an eyebrow. He's outspoken on eugenics, doesn't know about the Rex project, and this all needs to be wrapped up before he signs an important accord with his Russian counterpart. All very standard, very presidential stuff. However, a phone call between Revolver Ocelot, presumably using a hands-free kit, and an unnamed shadowy figure reveals that the strings of the Shadow Moses incident have all been pulled from behind the scenes.
No, sir. No one knows that you were the third one. Solidus. Goodbye, Mr. President.
The shock reveal that the US president is not only behind the entire thing, but also part of the Les Enfants Terribles program that created both Solid and Liquid Snake, pretty much laid the groundwork for the entire batch narrative of the following 1 million games. So there you have it, those are 10 video game characters who changed everything, read to you by a man who is barely a character and has never changed anything. Let me know what you made of it all in the comments below, and of course don't forget to like, share and subscribe. But in the meantime, thank you so much for watching. I have of course been Adam Cleary, and I'll see you soon. Goodbye.